want to welcome you again. Mark and I are from Cal State Fullerton, and we're the local coordinators of Better Together California Teacher Summit events. And that has been the funding source for this evening, and that provided you with the meal that you're having tonight. And I think that's awesome. Teachers so seldom get those kinds of treats. So I want to thank Dean Emeritus and statewide leadership member Clara Cavallaro, who'll make a few comments about the project.
Good evening. It's really great to be here. I just want to thank all of you for coming and thank all of our teachers for everything you do for all of our kids every day of the year. Better Together is the source of the funding and the organizer of this event. And it really is, Better Together is a statewide partnership between the California State University and the Association of Independent Colleges and Universities. And I'm really thrilled that tonight we have, as our speakers, a collaboration between Cal State and Chapman, the public and private partnership that we're really modeling here tonight, that our faculty are modeling. So I'm thrilled with that. And also, of course, we're always partnering with districts, and always thank Mike Matsuda and the Anaheim Union High School District for your partnership as well. In case you haven't heard, how many of you have been to a Better Together event in the past? Oh, most, okay, all right, great. So we've been doing the Better Together Summit, California Teacher Summit, for 5 years. We have been funded through private foundation and corporate grants. Those are ending this year. We are trying to get state funding to continue this initiative. All of the partners are really committed to it. We're here to celebrate teachers, to honor you by providing free dinner, for example, and also to celebrate your expertise and give you opportunities to learn and grow from each other. So we'll be sending out a survey after the event, and it will have some information if you'd like to send a letter of support for our request for state funding. That would be much appreciated. But anyway, this event is all about you. Hope you have a wonderful time tonight. Network, make some new friends, and share what you know and what you're learning. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Claire. Appreciate that. So I have the distinct privilege to introduce our first speaker tonight, Dr. Katherine A. She is an assistant professor of education at Chapman University, and the theme of Better Together, the concept of it, when Claire and Hallie and I and others were thinking about this 5, 6, 7 years ago, is that this is by teachers for teachers. And so I think it's very fitting that we have as our lead speaker tonight someone who epitomizes for me what it means to be a teacher who is always a learner. And I know of no one better than Katherine, who really sees herself not as someone who comes to tell you what you should be doing, but to share with you what she sees you doing in your own classrooms, and frames it in such a way that you realize how profound your work really is and how much it can impact all of us when we share it in this kind of forum. So I'll read a little bit off of the bio, but it's all on the back of the page in your folder, so I won't read the whole thing. But Dr. Ye's, her scholarship is driven by a commitment to the improvement of educational opportunities for all students, with a focus on students whose voices and identities have historically been marginalized by traditional schooling practices. Her research looks specifically at issues of participation, power, access, and developing transformative spaces for learning in K-12 and college classrooms. Katherine, it's all yours.
Hello, all. It is such a pleasure to be here. You know when your heart's beating because you're so excited? You all make me nervous. And I think the reason why is because this is the heart of the work. You all are doing the heart of the work. And what I'm here to share today is very much what Mark had shared. I'm here to talk about lessons learned. Lessons learned by the teachers in my life, which consists of, for me, starting 20 years ago as a classroom teacher, as a bilingual teacher of my students. My students are my greatest teachers. I have some students in this room that are amazing teachers right now. My colleagues like Mark and Hallie, that has deeply transformed and shaped the way in which I look at children. Most of all, I should actually shift so you can see the image. Most of all, these 5 teachers in this room. For the last 2 years, I've had the privilege to learn with 5 education specialists. I go into their rooms and we co-teach together. We co-teach and when we work with children classified with a mild, mod, or severe disability, with the idea that much of the world tells us that some kids can do math and some kids can't. And these 5 teachers and their children show us that within the word impossible is the word I am possible. So what I'm going to share with you today are what I've learned from them, that they've helped me see the things that I did not see, that the myths in front of us that blinds us from seeing our children's brilliance and hides the truth about our kids. I'm going to start off with a story, because a story's got to start with a story, right? I'm trying to be really good because Mark told me I can't walk around too much. I like to walk around the room like it's a park. Trying real hard. You all know H.G. Wells. In our room, descendants were from Hawaii. Shaka, you're like, I know H.G. Wells. 2 people. You all know H.G. Wells. Let me tell you. This man was a time traveler. In the early 1900s, he wrote The Time Machine. Now I'm like, yeah, Shakas, I know who he is. War of the World. Shaka, you're like, right? So this amazing individual also wrote a very short story, 4 pages long, called The Country of the Blind. Okay. Anybody know that story? Look at one person. This is exciting. Okay. As a math educator, I'm going to read you like a short synopsis of the story. Okay. Because I'm a math educator, I'm going to read it. It's a very short synopsis. So the story of the Country of the Blind is why in the Country of the Blind is the one-eyed man not king. So the protagonist is a mountaineer named Nunez. While attempting to climb an unconquered mountain in Ecuador, Nunez slips and falls down the side of the mountain. At the end of his descent, he finds a valley, cut off from the rest of the world. Unbeknown to Nunez, he had discovered the fabled country called the Country of the Blind. Upon discovering that everyone is blind, Nunez began reciting to himself the proverb, "In the country of the blind, the one-eyed man is king. I come with knowledge. I can see. I have experiences they don't have. I'm coming to lead." Right? It makes sense. Ooh. I'll share it all first. He arrives at the town, and he's disoriented and confused. The environment was organized such that the knowledge, skills, and language and resources that he came with was of little value. How can that be? He has an additional sense that everybody around him didn't have. And the reason why is because the community chose to develop, the environment itself was organized such that his knowledge and skills were of little value. The community chose to work when it was cool. You know it gets hot in the day, right? So they slept in the day and they worked at night. As they worked in the dark, our hero can do nothing but stumble about. There was no light. None of the buildings had been built with windows and there was no lighting of any kind. Nunez talked about light, sight, colors, which are entirely alien to everyone else. Everyone thought he was mad and delusional. So in the country of the blind, why is the one-eyed man not king? I stop and pause there because the story is not about the country of the blind. It's really about education. We are all different. Our kids are different. When does a difference become a difference that counts? When does a difference become one that allows us to be considered smart, intelligent, incompetent, and disabled? And my main argument here is children are not incompetent. Children are not disabled. Our system does so. What we need to shift our eyes on is moving away from fixing children to fixing our environment. Let me give you an example. This came from an 11-year-old, also with a label disability, as I was talking about, and that's my 11-year-old. You know, I'm trying to talk about instructional design. The problem is a problem in instructional design. She goes, oh, I know what you mean. I don't know if you can see it. You can't see it, so let me tell you. On the pencil, it says, let me read it. Too cool to do drugs. Shaka, you all remember those pencils, right? Okay, we all do. So this is an example of design fail, the 11-year-old tells me. Okay, it sounds great because you want a reminder every time you're holding your pencil to not do drugs. Oh, sorry. Okay, as we start to sharpen the pencil, what does it start to say? Okay. Look at it closely. Cool to do drugs. Do drugs, then just straight out drugs. I gotta call that out because an 11-year-old pointed that out to me, right? But I think the part of this talk is really about we gotta look at our instructional design. We've been looking at the kids for so long. They are who they are. You can't return them or change them. You can't wash them and they'll be someone else. They are who they are. Our eyes need to be on the instructional design. And what we really need to look at, and this is from Vygotsky. How brilliant was he in 1929, right? We still need to look back at Vygotsky. Vygotsky, in his early development, human development, he actually focused on disability studies. It was hidden from most of the world because within Russia, they were engaging in eugenics. So much of his work in that field was hidden. And what he argues is when we look at individuals, it's not about those who are able or disabled that's the problem. It's the way in which we position normacy. The way in which we consider some people are considered normal and some people are not. And what really drives that are myths. And these colleagues in the room, particularly these teachers, they've helped me see myths that blinds me. It blinds me from seeing what's in front of me. So let me go over just 3 main myths. 1, some of us are born math people. Okay, you all math people, you all know, right? I'm walking around, always at the airport, and I'm reading like an algebra textbook, right? Every time there's always somebody comes up to me. What do you do? I teach teachers math. And they always go, oh. And they literally shudder, their shoulders go up. Oh, I hate math. I'm not a math person. Shaka, you're like, yeah, I get that all the time. So that's an example of this belief that we call fixed mindset. Some of us are math people and some of us are not. And we think that it's rare. All of us in the room, we're like, we ain't those people. But many of our kids are, and oftentimes we think our kids are. What we found out, this idea of some of us being math people and some of us not, causes a lot of math anxiety. And we found out that it's actually a lot. 2 out of 10, 20 out of 100. Right? 200 out of 1,000. Many, many people, when I sit next to them, always on the plane, like flying back from Monterey this time for an hour, my colleague next to me was sharing his traumas about math. He'll say, gosh, I remember those time tests. Okay? I had 1 minute to do 100 problems. I was always that kid that prevented the rest of my class from getting that ice cream party. You think about that. Are you that teacher? Okay. I was once. I've done that before. Okay. Head in shame. Okay. And then they start talking about fractions. It's like fractions don't make any sense. It's so weird. And then why are we always looking for X? It's always right there. And then they start telling me, we have to memorize all these rules. We all remember this one. Ours is not the reason why. We just invert and multiply. And they go, then I get it confused. Which one do I invert? Which one do I multiply? The argument is, we need to move away from some people being math people or not, and build from true life. If I just said, here's 6 cups, and in my household, because I'm making rice for my family, I only have half cups. How many half cups would it take to make 6 cups? I asked my 7-year-old, she's like, Mama, that's easy. Half? You need 2 of them to make one whole. So it's just 2 times 6, 12. The kid is in 2nd grade. It's better than the other one, right? Then, let me give you another example because I have 2 kids. The other kid likes chocolate. And she knows we're trying to eat healthy. 6 candy bars. I'm only going to eat half a day before the ants eat them. How many days can it last? So what's the truth? One of my colleagues, these brilliant teachers, who I often get in the car after being in their classroom and I have to sit there for 10 minutes because I'm so blown away by how they're helping me see. They've shown me that children, regardless of ability status, every one of us, including you and me and every kid in our classroom, are all math people. We are all math people. We are not broken. Schools need to build their math to align with the way in which we see math in real life. Thank you, awesome teachers in the room. Myth number 2. Knowledge, you're going to be like, knowledge is situated in our brain. This is the one where my kids are like, that's weird, Mama. Your brain's right here. It is right here. I argue that's not true. Let me give you an example, and it's really cute. Oops, sorry. Make sure I get the right name. This is Jason. Nothing better than telling a story around peas. Okay. So Melissa Brennan, raise your hand. This is Melissa Brennan. Okay. She is awesome. She sends me a video in the middle of the day, right? She's like, you got to check this out. You know it's been raining nonstop, right? So it's raining, your kids can't go outside, they're having lunch, Melissa's having lunch with her kids. And you know, Jason's like 4, just turned 5, in an SDC classroom, okay, classified with autism and ADHD, not mainstreamed. The kid's sitting there going, Miss Brennan, how many peas do I have? How many peas do I have? And look what he does with his peas. Can I play the video? What, let me? Oh, this is so fancy. Let me show you his keys.
I make group of 10 and group of 3 is 15.
That's right. So what do you say? 10?
10
plus
3 equals 13.
Yay! Jeez. Look at that. It's like a 10 frame.
I'm making assumptions. I assume Melissa didn't make the 10 frames for him, right? He did it by himself. So I think this is a perfect video because the kid was not born making 10 frames with his peas, right? He wasn't born going, yeah, my peas should always be set 5 and 5, right? I hope not, maybe. Think that knowledge came from the classroom. That knowledge came from what Melissa was doing every day to build numerical fluency as that child was learning to count. As that child was engaging in not just workbook and textbooks, but counting real things. It wasn't rote knowledge. It was, let's look at the world around us and figure out how many things are in the world. So that Jason on a rainy day decides, I'm going to figure out how many peas I have. And Jason, being so awesome, was like, I wonder how many peas do I have in all? So the investigation continues. And I just got to call out, check out those 20, you see the 10 and 10? Look at how he does his 6 as 5 and 1. That is the beginning of numerical reasoning, problem solving, sense making. And it didn't come from him at birth. No one's born making P's and 10s. As far as I know, because my kid ate a lot of P's and didn't do that. It came from this. These are pictures of Melissa's classroom as they're counting real objects. And I just have to call out, you can't see that on the paper. It says 100 is equal to 93 plus 7. Not 93 plus 7 equals 100. Melissa intentionally writes her equations in different ways. So her students, even in her classroom at an early grade, sees that these two expressions are equivalent, building that algebraic reasoning earlier on. Can we just give a round of applause for Melissa in this room? Because we all want Jason in our classroom next year. Okay? I'm gonna bring some P's next time I go to the classroom. So what's the truth? Notice how the rest of the words are blurry? Because we have to zoom in on the truth to help us see from above. Knowledge is not situated in our minds. It's situated and built upon the tools and resources around us. It's built upon the resources and tools and real life experiences each of you bring to your students. It comes from you. It comes from their family. It comes from their real life. Thank you for doing that. But what I'm also asking us is to see that knowledge is not just situated in our social environments, it's also situated in our ideologies and our beliefs. When we look at factors, this is from John Hattie. When we look at all the factors, not about the child, not about the teacher, but teacher-student interactions, one thing that impacts children the most is teacher labeling. How we label a child, high, low, that has the greatest correlation to their performance. And I pause there because I want us to think about that. When I read that, it hit me in the gut. Because in my life, there's been moments when I've said, that kid's high, that kid's low. And by me saying that, even to myself, I've impacted that child's performance. Myth number 3. We must figure out our students' problems and figure out how to treat it. These slides are originally from Dr. Mark Ellis, who's helped me really look deeply at the history of mathematics. Just 2 days ago, I was at the birthplace of IQ testing, the intelligence quotient. It was created in the early 1900s because all of a sudden, a bunch of really powerful people had to provide education for everyone. And you know what really rich, powerful people have to give something to everyone? They all want their kids to have the best. So what they created was the IQ quotient, okay, the IQ test, and it was intentionally created to separate children based on race and class. Go home, look up the research. I didn't know this until Mark Ellis told me that the creation of IQ testing, which is the birthplace of SATs, birthplace of GREs, and all the testing that we use, was intentionally created to show some kids are better than others. And if we were to think about that, that was also the birthplace of differential instruction. So the birthplace of general education, special education, gifted, special pupils came at that time. And we can go, that was 100 years ago, Katherine. The world is a better place. We now have Disneyland, right? Schools are more segregated now than before desegregation. And if we look at how children are segregated in their classrooms, it is separated by race and class. So what I'm asking for is a shift of paradigm. For us to move away from looking at our children as a site of intervention. So moving away from the medical model, our children is not a disease. They're not the cold. They are not the flu. moving away from the idea that I need to look at a kid, diagnose their problem, and consider an intervention. What I want us to consider is target the curriculum as the reform. Every year, even with my 2 kids, I just got 2 at home. My husband will often say I'm the 3rd kid. Just the 3 of us? The range is huge. We are not alike. I bet in your class you're like, I feel like my kids, the range is getting bigger every single year. If you know that, we should just account for differences. We should design in mind that there is no norm. Because when we consider the norm turns out to be often us. We want them to be like us. There is no norm. There is no average kid. You're going to have a diverse group. And what we know is diversity is beautiful. The way in which Jason does his P's, the way in which Amelia does the things in her classroom, we are all different. And that difference is awesome. I do not want 100 me's in the classroom. That would be scary. Thank goodness for diversity. So what I argue for is our focus should be, instead of differentiation of the individual child, how can we shift our curriculum to account for how every one of us look at the world slightly different, and we may engage in mathematics slightly different, and that these differences are beautiful. It allows us to look at mathematics and the world in different ways, and that allows us to be more successful. Theory to practice. Let me show you just 3 quick examples. 1, our curriculum should build on the idea that every student has potential. How do we do that? 1, teach towards powerful math. I always feel like as a teacher, I'm like on the hamster wheel. I'm running as fast as I can, but the wheel ain't moving. So if I'm going to spend time on something, it's got to be powerful. So it can't be that. I can do that 1,000,000 times. It should be this. Our knowledge should be always grounded on what's relevant, on the mathematics that matters. 2, we have to in our hearts believe that every child is a sense maker. Every child can reason. Every child can problem solve. And if anybody questions that, they just need to walk into your classroom and you can show them that it's true. Because we know that what we believe about our students is the greatest indicator of their performance. And lastly, we need to see that learning is not individual, it's about a community. These 2 teachers that's going to come up after, I always have to pause a little bit because they almost bring me to tears. So many times in their rooms, we've had to pause because we have to stop ourselves to want to intervene. And when we pause and we allow our students to take the lead, they solve math in ways that we do not anticipate. And when we don't intervene, they help each other. They allowed their kids to be in the front of the classroom to grapple with the mathematics and to help us see things we don't see. And what they've also shown me is that we also need to build community. If we want our kids to, we do too. So what I'm asking for is not just a change in curriculum, it's a social movement. In social movements, when we think about Rosa Parks, it wasn't just her alone sitting back there because she was tired, right? She was actively involved in NAACP. And when that occurred, 10,000 Montgomery bus riders walked for 381 days. So what I'm hoping for is that we can continue to build community to push for a social movement for change. Thank you.
so much, Katherine, for your words and for getting us kicked off this evening. We really appreciate you and working with you. The rest of the program, we have 3 individuals who work with a range of children. 2 are teachers. 1 is a principal who will share her insights. Each of them will speak for about 8 to 10 minutes, and then we'll conclude the evening with a panel in front, and they will address briefly some of the questions that you may have or that you would like to just additional things you would like to say as we wrap up the evening. But I'd like to move now to our first EdTalk speaker. This is our dear Jill Lundgren. So Jill has 31 years of teaching. And I'm going to say that again. Jill has been teaching for 31 years. 25 of those years have been in special education. She has a master's degree in special ed with a specialization in serving children with mild and moderate disabilities. She currently teaches a grades 1, 2, 3 combination special day class at Walter Elementary School in Magnolia School District. Thank you so much.
Good evening. I have a jar filled with plastic inks. I want you to stop for a second and think how many are in here. Once you have your number, turn to a table partner and tell them how you got that number. Okay, she said there were 5 layers and between 30 and 35. Anybody else have a different way of figuring this out? Okay, well, oh yes.
So yeah, I did 6 around the bottom.
Uh-huh.
And then I counted 6 up because you had it turned a different way.
Okay. And you came up with 36. There are 35 in here. But more importantly, this is what my students do. They roll it around and they try to count each and every one, but I tell them, look at the size. How many groups of 5 might you see? How many groups of 10 might you see? And then I write down, I'm a shorty, sorry. We write down their estimates. And then we gather around on the carpet in a big circle and we dump it out. And we use a tens frame or a hundreds chart and we count out how many are inside. As we're counting, if we have overestimated or underestimated by a large amount, I say, wait a minute, let's start over. Who wants to change their answer? Halfway through counting. And so we'll change our answers. Well, sorry, I'm on the wrong page. This helps them develop number sense and rounding skills. And this is just one way I use numbers in my classroom. But this is not the sort of engagement where my students started this year in math. Students with special needs tend to have shut down by the time they get to my classroom. The pace and the rigor of their general ed classes has overwhelmed them, and they've started showing avoidance behaviors. They will act out and stop at nothing so that they don't have to answer in front of their peers. Maybe some of you have similar experiences to this or have students you're thinking of right now. Well, my philosophy in teaching is that I need to focus on making them welcome, safe, and feel valued. I really can't teach until this happens. Once my students have adjusted to my class and started to develop self-confidence, then they start to feel and see success. In my classroom filled with students with unique needs, I'm able to slow down and even back up to where they feel comfortable and they can experience success. I need to rebuild their confidence. And I do this by making learning fun, by just playing games with numbers. I introduce things that they already are successful at, and this provides them with some mastery of some basic concepts, and it helps them build automaticity and confidence. This year, I started with 3 students who could not count past 3. So that's where we started. We started with zeros, ones, and twos. They knew that, and that helped build their confidence. Then we added in 3. Here's an example. I had them tell me how many blocks they had, and then I had them shut their eyes. And I said, open your eyes. How many blocks are under my cup? Imagine their face when they could tell me. It was magical. They were so excited that they wanted to tell their peers how they got their answer. They could justify their thinking, and they had now become the experts. Over the next few weeks, we added in 4, 5, up to 10. Once we got to 10, we could start working on what makes a 10. How do you know? Show me. And they were now the mathematicians in my classroom. Each day, a different student helper, as part of their duties, are in charge of our morning routine. We start with attendance. Oop, there's some of my samples, sorry. We start with attendance, and so they drag their classmates' names into a tens frame. We leave the ones to the side that are absent, and then they write an equation, and I tell them, first we're gonna write it horizontally, and they write it out. Then we write it vertically, and I use hand motions, and they become so familiar with this math vocabulary just in a daily routine. When we look at the date, we can discuss how many Thursdays are there in a month? How many more days till a special holiday or a friend's birthday? How many more days till the weekend? We graph the weather. We discuss weather patterns and say, how many more sunny days than cloudy days? How many fewer rainy days than sunny days? These are concepts that are very hard to teach, but when I show them and we talk about it every day, it just becomes automatic. At the beginning of the year, I assign each kid a number for the class for the year. So when it's their turn, they put their number in the center and they write the 2 numbers that come before it and the 2 numbers that come after it. And then we read it as a class forward and backward. I can ask a kid, can you count backwards from 17? And they can do it because we practice every day. We also count how many days we've been in school. And then this links into an online rec and rec. As we were counting up toward the 100th day of school this year, the kids realized that the number of beads we hadn't counted were how many more days till the 100th day of school. They pointed that out to me. I also show them that a tally mark looks like a hand. It's 4 with a thumb that can grab that bundle, and we count by 5s for how many days we've been in school. We also use the hundreds, tens, and ones blocks. And we talk about how many hundreds make up that number, how many tens, how many ones. Although this takes about 15 to 20 minutes, depending on their need for prompting, I feel this is an empowering way to start their day because we cover so many math concepts in a relevant and meaningful way. And I want to give another shout out to Melissa Brennan. She and I worked together for many years at a school, and she started this idea. And together we've just developed it, and I add to mine because I have older kids, she has younger kids, so we do things a little differently, but it's just amazing the knowledge that our kids have after they've done this every day. And our kids have unique needs, and they can come up in front of the class, they talk the whole class through it, they're in charge, and it's amazing. When you enter my classroom, there's a counting activity taped to my door. So I might ask them to count to 10 or count backwards from 10. I ask them to count nickels to 50 or dimes to 100. The special thing about this, it's a secret password to get in the class. So everybody has to say it, and they're so excited. The helper of the day gets to stand there and make sure everybody says it correctly. And so often these kids need that extra repetition, and they don't even know they're doing math. So when I do sit down to teach math, Before I do, we subitize. And there is an amazing video by Jack Hartman, there's several, on subitizing. My kids challenge each other to see who can say that number first. And it's just an amazing math competition that just happens in my room every day. We run the numbers up to 10 and back down. We use hundreds charts. We show quantities on our fingers. But all these things I've mentioned, I'm not specifically teaching. They're just concepts they're exposed to daily. So then, when I am teaching that concept, it's so easy for them to do math. They're familiar with the concept, they're familiar with the vocabulary, and they find quick success learning these new ideas. They transfer this knowledge to new situations, and they're able to share their thinking with their peers. I have a math manipulative table at the back of my room. They know at any point in the day, if they need something to help them with math, they go grab it. They can grab whatever works for them. I have jewels, shiny rocks, rec and recs, tens, frames, hundreds, charts, number lines, and I would say 90% of my class grabs something every single day. But my favorite part is when I get a student that said, "Mrs. Lundgren, we forgot to do math today." They have no idea we have been doing math all day long. Thank you.
Thank you, Jill. I hope, like myself, I hope you're thinking about how this connects to the work we do. I know we all work in different contexts with different students, different ages, different settings. What I'm hearing is that it's about getting to know your students and playing to their strengths and to their experiences and valuing that. So thank you for sharing those. We have, as our next EdTalk speaker, Amelia Frias. She is a graduate of CSU Fullerton and is an innovative and compassionate education specialist with 14 years experience as an educator. She currently teaches grades 5-6 students with moderate severe disabilities in a self-contained classroom in Magnolia School District, where she was recently awarded Teacher of the Year. Her experience includes teaching high school students in Los Angeles Juvenile Hall. You'll hear about that. Teaching middle school students as an RSP teacher, and teaching elementary learners in a self-contained environment. These environments have inspired her to continually adapt education materials and instruction to be effective for her students. She has a personal passion for adapting curriculum for students with special needs. Amelia.
Good evening, fellow educators. As I look out to the audience today, I'm excited to have this opportunity to share my experiences both as a learner and as an educator. In order for you to understand why I have become the compassionate teacher I am today, you need to understand my experiences as a student. I was an emergent bilingual speaking English and Spanish in my home. I was given the label as an English learner, and I had an unrecognized learning disability. I grew up in a predominantly Anglo community, and many of my teachers had misconceptions about my future, based solely on the color of my skin. I once overheard my third grade teacher telling another teacher that it was a waste of time to provide me with the extra support I needed, since I would just end up pregnant and drop out of high school. Well, today I am proud to say I finished high school. No, I didn't get pregnant during those years. I have a bachelor's degree, a master's degree, and several credentials. My fifth grade teacher told my very young mother I was learning at the appropriate pace of a new English learner. But this was not the case, because I wasn't a new English learner. So my mother had to be my biggest advocate to have me assessed and find out I had a learning disability. I remember being in 6th grade and sitting in my IEP meeting. When they were sharing the results, I learned I was reading and writing at a 1st grade level. On the other hand, I was very high in math and problem solving. I was performing at a high school level. I finally knew what I was good in at school, and I received my first A in 6th grade. These experiences as a learner pushed me to become an educator whose students could count on. I started teaching with a 5th grade general education class with 38 students, of which 4 were deaf of hard of hearing students, mainstreamed all day in my classroom with an aide. As a new teacher, I was given the ELs, the academically struggling, and students with challenging behavior issues. I knew I had to find ways to motivate and engage these students. I strategically seated my students in the classroom. My aide would do sign language, and she would sit at the front of the room. As I taught key vocabulary words in the units, I had the students learn the sign for that word. I was applying the most used learning styles, which was visual and kinesthetic. The classroom climate and engagement was welcoming, and students would come to school excited and safe to learn. After having this group, I decided to go into special education as an RSP teacher. However, that was not the way things turned out initially. My first assignment as a special educator was at the Los Angeles Central Juvenile Hall with the boys unit. This experience was very emotional and challenging for me at first. I had a self-contained class with many young men who had outdated IEPs because they had dropped out of school. Many of the IEPs focused on the same thing over and over. I don't know how many times I saw the Pythagorean theorem listed as a learning goal for these young men year after year. I had to tell myself that they were still young people no matter their circumstance. They required guidance and support. Most importantly, they were looking for someone to believe in them. I had to find creative ways to bring tools and manipulatives that could help these young men engage in problem solving. For example, most of us use response boards with dry erase markers, but the markers might be used for purposes other than education. So I purchased the dry erase crayons instead. This was a surprise for the boys, since they had not used crayons in a long time. When it came time to work with angles, I could not use the protractor or the compass, as they were considered weapons. So I had to find ways for them to measure angles with other tools that would not be considered dangerous. I remember one young man telling me I was not a real teacher. The next day, I displayed a copy of my degree and my one-page IEP from 6th grade. I set up my expectations and boundaries. I told them if I could make it to college and get a degree, then they could too. I challenged each student differently because each one had different needs and circumstances. I found out what I needed from students by taking the time to get to know them. This is challenging when your classroom population changes daily. Most of the boys were learning multiplication, division, and pre-algebra concepts and skills. I also started to find ways to motivate them to continue to learn about other subjects. Math was easy because it's everywhere. The next subject that was easy to connect with the students was history. Most of these boys have never been out of Los Angeles County. They only knew their neighborhood. So I started connecting historical events that occurred in their neighborhoods during World War I and II. I was hooking them for a desire to research and learn. One young man once asked me, Miss, why are you always smiling? Don't you know this is juvenile hall? My response was, I smile daily because I'm thankful to be alive another day to come and see you. This threw him off, but it was something I knew he enjoyed hearing. What person doesn't appreciate hearing this? The day came when it was time to change student population, and I went into a moderate to severe 5th and 6th grade classroom. This is the current population I work with in Anaheim. These students, just as the young men I worked with in LA, were labeled at risk, or there's no hope for them, and were seeking my help. Prior to arriving in this self-contained special day class, I had no idea what touch math was, which is a common intervention approach. I was told literally have students touch a number like 5 as a way to develop number sense. I tried it with my students, but the strategy was really just nonsense. It was not helping my students to understand concepts of number and arithmetic. I started attending many math conferences and workshops, and yes, I learned a lot, but they were all geared to the general education population. I remember sitting at my desk one day writing goals for my students and planning my lessons for the week, and I thought to myself, why am I not exposing them to the same curriculum as their peers are learning? So I started with introducing fractions to my students, a concept my students have never been exposed to. I started with identifying fractions and front-loading them with vocabulary. This year, I started implementing fraction tiles with my students. Students who are usually nonverbal were shouting out terms such as denominator, numerator, half a fraction. My students were engaged and enjoying the time they spent with the manipulatives. My students have fine motor and gross motor challenges that require typical instructional tools to be modified. For example, just like Jill mentioned, we also use Rec and Recs in my classroom. However, the first set I was given, the beads were too small for my students to manipulate easily. So I purchased a jumbo size Rec and Rec. But where Jill's primary learners use it to make 5s and 10s, the Rec and Rec I use has 10 rows of 10 beads. So students can not only add to larger quantities, but also visualize multiplication with arrays of beads. I have some students who are learning their multiplication times tables. Most of them are having success with remembering them because this year I started by asking them to show me with arrays how they come up with the answer. It was very difficult and challenging at first. Once the students were given daily practice and various ways to see arrays on the jumbo Rec and Rec, on a hundreds chart, and with different manipulatives, my students figured out how to count by 2s and 5s, which helped them to multiply by these factors. I started implementing math talks daily in my instruction. I was told my students would not participate because they were nonverbal. However, they just required the right tools to communicate and show me their thinking. I know my students are learning and they are excited daily with their learning. Parents have told me they have seen the growth in their students. I have only told you of 2 examples where students have been denied the opportunity to grow and learn because of their labels. But when given access to meaningful learning, ended up showing me their brilliance. I went into education to challenge such deficit views and to demonstrate to others that all children are eager to learn if they are given the opportunity. Thank you. So there's the bigger modified Rec and Rec that I use in my classroom also, because I do have a lot of students that tend to be in wheelchair bound or table bound. And there's the 10-row one. And then that's the success of my students. They're showing us powerful stuff right now. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Amelia. And now I'm very pleased to introduce our third EdTalk speaker, a principal. She got her undergraduate degree in health education, a graduate degree in special education. She has a multiple subject teaching credential, an ed specialist credential, and an administrative credential. She has been an educator in La Habra, in Covina Valley, and in Fullerton, where she is now serving as principal of Rolling Hills School, where they serve many kids with special needs. In fact, all of them are embraced at her school. I'm pleased to present Julian Fowler.
Thank you. It is my pleasure to be here. As she said, I've been in education for a while in multiple school districts. Currently in my 18th year in education. I have taught general education, special education, and I'm now in my 9th year as an administrator and my 3rd school site. 2 of them have been Title I, and one of them is currently what the Hill School or the non-Title I school. That just means we don't get money. We still have the kids. So when I was asked to come and talk about my school, I think I thought about why. And it's probably because my school is probably one of the most creative, flexible, diverse, and inclusive education environments I have ever had the pleasure to work in. But before I really get into the nitty-gritty of what my school's like, I should probably tell you a little bit about why my personal journey has created a commitment and an incredible passion for why I do what I do every single day. So 6 years ago, my youngest child was entering school. My oldest child had gone to school, to kindergarten, and she took it. It was like a duck to water. It was, yes, Mommy, I want to go. I'm so excited. I made friends. I'm learning. I'm reading. Everything was perfect. So off goes my youngest. I'm so excited. He's 4 years behind her, and I'm thinking it's going to be exactly the same. Wrong. It was not the same experience. He did not, while he went with the same excitement for kindergarten and for learning, that wasn't the experience that he had. He struggled to learn. He struggled to behave. He struggled to fit into this environment of kindergarten. And I was like, why? What's going on? How can we help you? So we struggled harder. We did our homework. We practiced our letters. And at the end of that school year, no matter how much work we'd put in, he knew 22 letters and 10 sounds. So with a heavy heart, I talked to his teacher. We talked to my family. It's a big united family, and we said, let's give him another year, that gift of childhood. He's gonna get it. One more year. He's a summer baby. He's young. We're gonna put this in. He's gonna get it. Second year of kindergarten ended very similarly to the first year, except now he hated school. That was a bonus. So then came first grade and second grade. He was in RTI, he had extra support, small group instruction. We'd taken him to the doctor, and he had been diagnosed with ADHD and anxiety. At the end of second grade, this is my heart, I took him to an event, a school event. He had friends, he was so excited to go, it was a concert. And I was like, oh, it's gonna be so much fun. We had a picnic and a chair, and I sat there, and we went there, and half an hour into that event, my child came over, and he was defeated. And I said, sweetheart, what's wrong? And his shoulders were down. And he's like, Mommy, I want to go home. And I'm like, why? We're here. There's music. There's fun. There's friends. He said, I just want to go. And I said, tell me what's going on. What's happening? And I said, why don't you want to go play with your friends? They're all playing. They're running around. And he said, oh, they don't want to play with me. I'm the bad kid. And I said, how can that be? This is my 8-year-old child. How can he define himself as bad? And I said, why would you say that? And he said, oh, I'm getting in trouble every day at school. I can't sit in my chair. I don't do things the way everybody else does. I can't read, Mommy. I'm the bad kid. And I said, oh my goodness. How can we have placed this beautiful, innocent child into a box where he has already defined his life? And he's not the only child I know that has ended up in this place. And he's 8, and he's done with education. That moment changed everything for me. I had been in special education, but it changed the way as an administrator I look at what's happening in our classrooms. When I walk into our classrooms, I'm not looking so much at what the teacher's teaching, I'm looking at what the students are doing with it. I am looking for those kids that can't sit in a chair. How are we engaging them in their learning? What are we doing to ensure that they're not developing that mindset of I'm the bad kid? It's not a perfect thing that I do, and sometimes I see things that I don't like as an administrator, as we all do. But more often than not, at my school site, what I see fills my heart with joy. At the end of that second grade year, I decided to bring my child to my school, Rolling Hills. It was going into my second year of being a principal there. My staff knew me. I developed a good relationship, and I asked them, can I bring him here? He's not perfect. Will you love him? Because more than anything, that's what he needs. And they said, oh my goodness, Julian, yes, what an honor. We would love to have your child. I said, are you sure? He's a little quirky. And they laughed, just like you did. And I was like, absolutely, let's bring him. That started our journey. At the end of that year, I also got a $40,000 grant. That's a lot of money. What was I going to do with it? In addition to purchasing technology, we looked at what else can we do to put that learning back in the students' hands. We bought 15,000 Legos. Believe it or not, you're like, what in the world are you doing with Legos at the elementary school? I'll tell you about that in a minute. We purchased Connects, Little Bits, art activities, so much stuff. And it has infused the learning across our campus. But what's even more unique is the learning pathways that we have at our campus. We have traditional classrooms, just like most of you have always seen, with one grade level in first grade, and they move on up with their cohorts all the way through. But 50% of my school is multi-age. What is multi-age? That means that my students, in this case, there's 4 grade levels, 2 teachers, 4 years, 64 to 68 kids in these classrooms. And they stay for 4 years with those classrooms. You're like, oh my word, that sounds a lot like a special education classroom, except for this is general education and a lot more kids. And what they do inside those classrooms, and in our traditional as well, is they individualize the learning for those students. They have daily plans that are designed to meet the needs of each child. They have things that are similar and things that are different. The way our students respond to an academic challenge or an activity can look very, very different. This one may decide, I want to do a PowerPoint. This one may do an Adobe Spark or an Adobe Voice. The other one's like, I really just want to do it on paper. 2 + 2 is 2, and I don't need to explain it, is why. And we have taken that process, and our children have thrived. My own child started in a traditional classroom, and his next year went into 4th grade in a multi-age classroom. I was like, are you sure you're ready to take him for 3 whole years? But they did. And what we found out, that the students coming to us at Rolling Hills, and all of you too, they're fundamentally different than what we learned, right? These students are technology rich and embedded. They are used to answer after answer. Thank you, Siri. Thank you, Alexa. I can just call out my answer. Somebody talks to me and gives it to me. I don't have to wait. I don't have to look in a dictionary. I don't have to look in a glossary. What is this thing you want me to do? I have to look in a book, and that might take me a long time. I don't have to wait 10 years. And so we have to develop, as educators, a way to incorporate that learning style into what we're doing now. And I think the pathways that we're offering it do. One of the things that I think we are really, really good at Rolling Hills is the ability to be flexible in that learning, to look at a group of students and say, all right, you're considered a high, not labeling, as we said, lower and low. We're going to pair you together, because what we have found is that our high kids are really fundamentally good at algorithms, at the 2 + 2. But our lower kids, they may not be able to do the 2 + 2, but they can use manipulatives. They can use pictures and boxes and arrays and all of these amazing things that our upper grade kids are like, I don't know how to do that. And these lower grade kids are coming in. With our Legos, we are teaching them area and perimeter. Our 3rd graders do a house activity where they build a house, and they have to tell their classmates, this is the area, this is the perimeter, this is how I would do it. And they know area and perimeter. They get that concept because of Legos. They do multiplication with Legos. They do fractions with Legos. We do, our 4th graders this year created, using our Little Bits, multiplication tables where they light up when they get right. So they took those little bit things that they had created down to our third graders, and they were so excited. And they were like, all right, third graders, here's your 7s. Can you do it? And when the third graders saw that they put it on the right one, it lit up. And they were like, oh, this is so cool. And they did all of their multiplication tables, and they keep learning. And that was a collaborative process that we did. With our multi-age, with the high and the low and the upper grade and the lower grade, we have probably more embedded peer tutors than at any other school site I've ever worked at. Our kids grow up being the little buddies to the big buddies, and they share those ideas across. So our teachers, the one thing they have is they have like these routine and transition like trainers. Like, so when those kindergartners come, they have like a whole room of mommies that'll teach them how to do that. It makes the year so much easier and so great because they learn from each other. As I conclude my 4th year as principal, the staff and I continue to evaluate what we do every day. And this year, one of our focuses we realize is that anxiety, not just math anxiety, but anxiety is permeating our kids. They are frozen before a test. They can't handle interactions or conflict. And so this year, in addition to doing all of the manipulatives and hands-on, we added a practice of mindfulness. We use chimes in every single classroom where we do a quiet moment, and our children are asking for that. I can't really think. I need a break. Can we take a chime and just sit here? And so we'll play the chime, and everyone just sits quiet until they can no longer hear the noise. And after that, they look up and they're ready to learn. They re-engage their learning. And so that is a way that we've taken some of our kids that can't sit, that can't be traditional. We have other things like ball chairs and wobble chairs and seats and rubber bands and Velcro and all of these things to help engage these kids. And sometimes it's enough. Sometimes it's not. But I can tell you at my school, we continue to persevere every day to make a difference in these kids' lives. And as for my kiddo, he's finishing his 3rd year in 5th grade, and he is at grade level, which is the best news because I know if he can do it, so can others. I believe that what we're doing, the confidence, the self-esteem building, because again, that first year when he was with us, we didn't focus on his academics. We just loved him. And at one moment when he went into 4th grade, he said, Mommy, I'm in the wrong class. And I said, again, I'm like, why do you think you're in the wrong class? They want me to grow and have this mindset thing, and I'm fixed. I'm stuck right where I'm at. And I'm like, I think you're exactly where you need to be. Thank you.
Throw out your first question. They said they're ready for anything and everything. Sorry, I've got a lady was asked to taught at prison. Jill, yes.
Myself?
Yeah. You said that your whole thing is you wanted kids to go to college, just like you didn't have a chance. I was wondering if any of your kids did end up going to college.
So his question is, he wants to know if any of my students did go to college. And from what I know, I did have 2 of my students that did end up going to college. Some of them, obviously, with whatever situations they had to have different lifestyles. But 2 of them did. It was a lot of pushing on my part to make sure that they either got their high school diploma or their GED done. And it's a lot of having somebody believe in them. Literally having somebody believe in them.
So as a classroom teacher, I used to make home visits to every one of my students' homes. And I taught in downtown LA with students that were just like me, emergent bilinguals, and every one of my students were students of color. My first class was about 20 years ago, and I just got a text yesterday asking from a student for my first year teaching if I'll go to her bridal shower. My response is, you really want your teacher there? But it's been, I think, the greatest honor for me to see the impact that we make and to realize that we don't teach math. We teach children. We teach real people. And I would say still today, I teach at Chapman University, and every year, my first cohort, I also teach a course on multicultural education. My students from my first year teaching 20 years back, many of them live in San Diego, have careers of their own. They'll come and they'll teach with me and share with the pre-service teachers how important teachers are and how much they remember the little things that we do.
How am I supposed to tell them to ask, am I going to use this? And I know for a fact that how it won't. How do I say you have to learn it because you have to without saying that? Yeah. For us
non-math. Okay. So so the question was, I teach algebra, and they'll go, why am I learning this? And there's aspects of it where it may not be as relevant to their daily lives. Did I do an okay job summarizing that? Okay. I love algebra. I'll be honest with you. I was at Monterey County just 2 days ago, and I started working with a bunch of parents and kids, and I started with the magic trick. I'm like, I want you to say a number in your head, 1 to 10, right? Through a series of steps, I look around the room, I'm like, your final number, I can read your mind, your number is 1. And all the parents are like, oh my gosh, Katherine A is a mind reader. Then we take out algebra tiles, and I show them, they do it, and they prove how, algebraically, I can prove how I was able to get to everybody's 1. So I think that we have to unlearn how we learned. I love algebra because it's a generalization of things in the world. It helps us make sense of patterns and relationships. But the problem is, I have got a kid right now in 6th grade that's in algebra. They've been finding X for 4 months, right? It's on the paper. At no time have they connected contexts. So we have to help ourselves and help each other to find the relevancy, find the tools, so that we can learn from each other and fix the harm that was done to us when we were learning algebra. That's just one perspective. Would you like that?
Similar to that, I had students in 7th grade learning algebra who did not care so much about variables, but they cared about things like quinceañeras. They had older siblings. They were thinking ahead to their own time when they might have a quinceañera. And so the problem they explored was comparing 2 different venues that they might host this event at, and they had different pricing rates. And they had to use mathematics, use algebraic reasoning to figure out how to compare those. And it ended up as 2 linear equations that they figured out, well, depending on the number of people, one might be better than the other. But they realized how useful that kind of thinking really was. So I think you're right. It's about the context, not the mathematics. Often in the textbooks that we have, the context has been trivialized or even removed completely, and that's where we run into the question of why am I doing this?
So the big common core and all this hands-on real life, they don't really go hand in hand. I'm so-called number one with the math person. I grew up in a system where common core was kindergarten, 12th grade, and to college. I love it. I know it. I dream it. Now, how do you adapt all this hands-on to the common core? I had master teachers telling me and principals like, no, you can't do all this manipulativeness. You can't do all that. It's not in your common core book right now. Go back to the standard and follow the lesson. and the kids weren't getting it. But having hands-on like this, so what do we do with that?
So I guess the question would be, how do you teach math in the Common Core when you're being told not to use manipulatives? So I don't know who or how where you came across that. I think Common Core actually is hands-on. It is manipulatives. It is CGI. We use sets where it's like, okay, students, how many shoes do we have in the room? How many math problems can we solve in a day? Or finding there's a bag of marbles. How many marbles are there? And math doesn't have to be an algorithm. Math has to be conceptual understanding. And I think using the manipulatives, using the hands-on learning, providing them with multiple opportunities, whether it be drawing pictures, dots, manipulatives, whatever you can do to get them to understand, and tying it back to the algorithm helps them to develop that conceptual understanding.
And the student didn't follow the steps as stated, solve it with step number 1. They were like, no, you can give it to that. So it's just maybe I was told to not do it the right way. I do like the hands-on. I think students learn more with it. I want to implement it every lesson. But they tell me no, they didn't ask them to solve it that way. They didn't follow the algorithm to solve it. They got the right answer, but not the way I asked them.
I guess for me as a principal, what I would say the beauty of the Common Core is there is no right way to solve it. It is about the 15 different ways to solve it and which way makes sense in your brain. Like I said, with our high kids, our low kids, our highs go traditionally to the algorithm. With our lower kids are going to the pictures and the dots and the arrays and all of this. And both answers at the end of the day are right. There isn't a wrong answer per se in terms of the way you solve it. And that's what my philosophy as an administrator is. And I can speak to one of my teachers and student teachers that are here tonight, and they know that I am not just preaching to the choir here. I live it, breathe it, and if they need it, we get it, because I think it's more important that they understand.
My question then kind of follows that. So you purchased all these materials. So how do you incorporate that with your current math adoption that you use? Is it an extra time a day? Do you have staff development? Like, how do you incorporate that with your math curriculum?
So how do we incorporate hands-on and manipulatives? So my guiding philosophy is that a curriculum does not drive what we teach or how we teach or when we teach. We are guided and really ruled by the standards. So using the manipulatives infused to teach those standards, I've given my teachers permission to say, you know what, if we use Go Math. I don't know what everyone else uses. But if it is not meeting your students' needs, if it is not making sense to your students, then don't use it. At the end of the day, the standards drive instruction, not the curriculum.
How do you ensure during a class of several different grades within the same classroom, how do you ensure that those students are able to hit all the necessary standards before they transition to the next set of, like, let's say it's first through third, then like fourth through sixth, how do you ensure they hit all those before they jump to fourth?
So I'm not sure if that there's actually 2 points. How do we ensure that they meet the standards, and how do we assess to ensure that we know that they've met the standards? I think there's 2 kind of levels there. So first of all, when the students come in every year, we do just a baseline to kind of see where they're at. And then the standards, again, drive the instruction, so the teachers know. So if our students maybe are high, we have some Ks that come in, they already know how to read, they know how to write. And if you just put them on the kindergarten standards, they would die and we would have lots of behavior problems. So they're moved to where their ability is. It's a developmental program, and I'm not going to tell you it's easy. My teachers work really, really hard to individualize the instruction for those kids. They do provide core instructional time for each grade level. So kinder gets a time of core instructional time, and our first graders are taught independent skills where they're working on math manipulatives or games or reading, and we have lots of volunteers that are coming in to help them out. And then in the afternoon, when our little guys go home, because our little guys in multi-age are half day, our first graders are getting core instruction in math and reading and language arts. And again, that small group individualized based on those kids. So if we have a first grader that needs that support in the kinder, they might do some kindergarten lessons as well, but then they also get exposed to that first grade lesson in the afternoon. So there's the ability to really do their intervention per se with their classmates as well, and they don't really notice the difference. We don't really say, oh, you're in kinder, so you can only get this, or in first grade, and we kind of move them back and forth. It's very fluid within those classrooms. One of our parents is actually here tonight as well, and probably can attest to that. But over the course of the 4 years, they are assessed and met, and then for the writing, especially for the first, second, and third graders, they do that all together. So because we're writers workshop, what they do is the little guys may not have the same expectation for what they're producing, but they're exposed to prepositions, nouns, adjectives, verbs, even as low as kindergarten. And so they're getting that higher level instruction. And then we meet with them in small group to ensure that the instruction meets their needs and they're still able to move forward. Is that kind of? Okay.
So how do you get so much and effectively ignore all of the requirements, for example, science and schools? I mean, where we have to build in the vocabulary that will propel other
science, yeah. How do we do not ignore the question being science social studies. So across even those multi-age, science and social studies is taught in a 4-year rotation. And so instead of just having like, okay, all Ks are only going to get this social studies or this science, it's a 4-year program. So over the course of those 4 years, they're exposed to the concepts and science and learnings of all 4 grade levels. So community, neighborhoods, I don't remember what second and third is for some reason, all the way up. And then in 4th, 5th, and 6th, when we have California, American, and then ancient civilizations, they teach them in a rotation. So they get all of those standards are met, and science as well. They do a whole year of, rather than saying like a little bit of life, a little bit of physical, a little bit of earth, they'll do a whole year of earth science. They'll do a whole year of life, a whole year of physical science. So they're focused. So over the course of those 3 years, they're still getting all those standards met and exposed and hands-on. And their collaborative learning is across grade levels. So they do groupings all year long. So in our upper grade, it might be two 6th graders, a 4th grader, a 5th grader, all working together on those projects in science and social studies. And then writing is taught the same way as in the K-3. They get exposed to all of the concepts. What they're expected to produce is at their grade level. And if they're above grade level, they just keep going.
Yes. And then I'll come. So I'm just burning to ask this question. So, Jill and Amelia, what would you say? Because you have an audience of folks, some of whom will be the teachers of your students at some point in the future, right? Very likely. What do you want to say to your students' future teachers about the students you teach and what you see from them and what you hope their future teachers see in them?
Okay, what I hope to see in my future students' teachers is teachers that accept them where they're at and help build them and grow them into better human beings. My children, although they have such unique and sometimes strange needs, they are amazing learners and they can soak it up in ways we can't even comprehend. Stuff gets told back to us in ways that we just were not expecting, but they're listening, they're learning, they're watching, and just take them from where you get them and help them blossom.
So with my student population, my biggest goal has always been to teach independence. Because with my kids, my students, a lot of people tend to have sympathy for them, or they want to do things for them. And it's to teach others to give them that independence and let them be independent to show what they have. And one of the pictures that Dr. Ye has shown was of my student putting Unifix cubes around to show the perimeter of an area. And in that day, I'm not going to lie, I was crying and I was amazed that he did that without using a grid, without just simple remembering the day before what we had talked about and discussed. And like Jill said, I just gave him the tools out there. Show me how you're going to find the perimeter. 3 of the other students got a grid and they started tracing, but he didn't. He went to go get the Unifix cubes and showed me how to do the perimeter. And he left me just, I had to step away because I knew then that he was showing me how he understood it. And that's what I need teachers to see with my students, to let them have that independence and not to be afraid to give them that independence.
Mathematics brings a lot of anxiety, and not just with kids, but with other teachers. You can hear it in this room, and with families. I teach high school, so clearly they get really upset when I don't give them the answer right away. So my question for you is, how do you promote that shift, not just with your kids, but with the people in the building around you, and with the parents of kids coming in who are like, I don't like this Common Core stuff. I know you've heard it.
Yes. Oh my goodness. Okay. I don't know if I can repeat the question. So how do we make a shift for the teachers around us in using manipulatives to teach Common Core? Is that correct? In my classroom, it's all about the understanding of the concept and being able to show it or tell it. And so when they're able to actually explain to you how they came about the answer, you know that they know it. It's amazing. They know that they know it, and they can share it with their peers. Sorry, I'm deep in thought. The thing I love about Common Core is there's not one way to get the answer. There are 10 different ways. Today we were working on more than or fewer than in a math equation, and we were supposed to draw these comparison bars, and I was so confused. And this was a first grade math lesson, and I'm confused. But when we grabbed the manipulatives and we put it on the floor and we worked it out, it all made perfect sense. Or if you relate it to something, like Katherine was showing how she relates 6 divided by 1/2 using cups of rice or candy bars. If you can relate it to something that's meaningful in their life, you've won the battle. And then they feel like the king of the world. I'm not quite sure I answered it completely, because it is hard to get other teachers to see it this way. But honestly, my kids are so prepared to move on, and they do great on the testing they're given. But the test part on a paper pencil test is very difficult for them. So I let them use manipulatives.
So just like I talked about earlier about my boys in the halls, how they always had the Pythagorean theorem as their goal. I have my daughter's IEP on Tuesday, and I was just given their goals for her. Guess what goes on there? So I've already emailed the teacher my concerns and my suggestions for goals for her, because I work with her daily in math, and I know there's going to be more challenging problems than that. in math for her because I see it daily for both of my daughters. And it's like, to explain to the teacher, I know I'm going to have a long IEP meeting on Tuesday and probably showing them other ways because I'm showing her all these different ways and manipulate. She goes, but the teacher doesn't show me that way, but I understand what you're telling me. So it helps her to understand that. But now how do I transfer that to her teachers? Because I know that's going to be something that I'm on the next level. I am very involved in the district. I get involved in the LCAP and the DLAC and everything because I need my daughters to have those opportunities to be successful, because right now they don't feel successful at all. And they're not enjoying school and they're really having that anxiety. And it's a shame because I work so hard to break that and they're feeling it daily. So, and parents, my parents are excited to see their own kids doing math because, yeah, I do have the one kid who was able to find the perimeter. He can't count past 3, but yet he was able to display what the perimeter is. And now I got to find ways for him to be able to count those blocks around to show the perimeter. So he has a higher functionings in there. It's just how do we get him to go to that next step?
I want to acknowledge someone in the room, Jenny Frankie. There's powerful people in this room that I want to highlight some of the things she's done with Hallie and Mark as well. I think this idea of, there's a lot of rumors out there, like this idea of rumors are truth and truth are rumors around what the Common Core is, especially on social media, right? So this idea of how do we support teachers and parents to understand the Common Core? The Common Core, the biggest shift is the standards for mathematical practice. That our goal isn't just to support our kids to learn content. It's to support them to learn content in ways where they get to develop the dispositions, mindset of what it means to be a math thinker and learner. I want to give props to Jenny Frankie. One of the things that they've done, one of the ways to get parents to understand the Common Core is bring the parents in. So one of the things that they did was have kids ask their parents, how do you do math in your daily life? And then look at your standards and bring them in to come and engage in the lessons with you. From, engaging in as a caterer, or someone who, works for UPS. Think about the ratio and proportions, surface area, volume lessons, different size boxes having to fit in your UPS truck. That's like serious math, right? So there's so many colleagues. I think one of the best ways I've seen across many different schools is we got to learn together. And for us to really understand the Common Core standards, we have to build and leverage, just like how we have to build and honor our children. We have to honor the knowledge that our parents have and bring them into the classroom. And you should talk to Jenny Frankie later on if you want to highlight awesomeness.
Mm-hmm. I was actually going to mention that project and say the way that we've supported or built parents' capacity is by helping them see that math is Common Core. We've been doing Common Core our whole lives. We use math in ways that we're not even aware that we use math. And a lot of times we don't stop to think about it, but every day I go to the gas station, I'm trying to figure out how much per gallon, multiplying, right, how much money I have, or if I'm going to go to the grocery stores, how much I'm going to spend, how many pounds. So the parents are always using the math, and we encourage them to use it with their kids daily. And that is Common Core, because that is the common knowledge that they can share with their kids that they're not even aware that they have. So empowering parents and asking them, what is it that you don't like about Common Core? Because you're using it all the time. You're solving problems constantly in your head automatically. And that's empowering and making them see that within themselves. Then they can allow for that open mindset of like, I can, and that growth mindset, oh, well, then I get it, why we're doing this way, to develop that critical thinking piece.
So thank you for asking that question. Thank you.
Thank you. So I want to recognize time. We have a few minutes. We can hang out, but let's thank our panel.